Welcome to What is Going for new thought from the edge of Each week on OMTimes flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandy Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Here is your host, Sandy Sedgbeer.
Hello. In 1979, author, teacher, and consciousness researcher Penny Kelly experienced a full, spontaneous awakening of Kundalini that completely changed her life. The experiences that followed, which is shared in 7 riveting books, included visitations from a group of small men in brown robes who shared explicit information about what is now coming to pass, encounters with a group of elves living on her farm, explorations of other dimensions which revealed the multidimensional structure of the psyche, a collaboration with biophysicist and scientist Dr. William Levengood, whose study of plants and soils from crop formations revealed astounding secrets about energy and the nature of consciousness, and much, much more. Penny Kelly joins us now to share some of what she's learned, which underlines why it's never been more important for us to raise our consciousness. Penny Kelly, welcome.
It's good to be here, Sandy. Thank you for having me.
Penny, before we start, anyone listening to that run out might wonder, I really think it's important to establish your professional credentials. So you were working as an engineer for the Chrysler Corporation when you had your Kundalini awakening. You left to study the brain, consciousness, intelligence, intuition, perception, and cognition, which led to working with schools and corporations as an educational consultant specializing in accelerated and brain-compatible teaching and learning techniques, and you hold 2 degrees, one in humanistic studies and one in naturopathic medicine. Now, with that out of the way, for those who don't know, tell us what a Kundalini awakening is and how it impacts the life of a person.
Our Kundalini awakening is a massive awakening of consciousness. And it's not just an awakening of consciousness, because when you say that to most people, they say, well, I already am conscious. It's an awakening to unlimited consciousness. And when I say unlimited, I mean exactly that. No limits on how many places you can be in at one time. No limits on where you can put your consciousness and observe and experience in and out of the body, reading other people's minds, clairvoyant, clairaudient, clairsentient, everything that you can imagine and more, much more. The power of that experience is absolutely stunning. It is a roaring, shaking, excursion into the depths of Source. And when you come out of it, you've been totally rewired. The brain is totally different. So
how does it affect?
And that's... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, let's be clear. You didn't have much experience in researching consciousness beforehand. So when that happened, is it not... I would think it's like a lightning bolt hitting you. How does it affect your body?
Oh, that's very interesting that you would say that, Sandy, because people who have been struck by lightning have almost the same kinds of things that happen. The consciousness opens up and they can do all kinds of things that they couldn't do before. But it is an electromagnetic event. It is a charge of electromagnetic and powerful electrical energy that moves through the body-mind system. It moves up through each nerve plexus, which we often refer to as chakras, and it activates each one of those. It keeps on going. It moves up. I described it like a freight train because it's this huge roaring, sensation moving up the center of you, and it hits your brain, and it just obliterates your entire self. You have no self after that. You're in this place that the ancients called the void, and you may stay there for only 5-10 seconds. But if it goes wrong, the body can really suffer. You can self-incinerate. You can have an arm or a finger or a leg melt and fall off, which sounds really awful. It is really awful. You can have an organ burn out because it just is too toxic, and there's a reaction. It just can't flex with the amount of change that is happening in that instant. It affects the body deeply. Spiritual awakening is a change in the physical, biological, and chemical operation of the body.
So what triggers this, or what triggered it in your case?
Well, it can be triggered by a lot of things. It would have been nice if it had been triggered by something like meditation, but I had no idea what meditation was, or something easier than just the spontaneous explosiveness that I experienced. I look back and I think the only thing I can offer is that I had fallen in love for the very first time. I was truly in love. It was unconditional love. I was being totally who I was, and enjoying every moment of everything in my life. I was so thrilled about, having finally become an engineer for Chrysler. I was so thrilled about the things I was learning just about how the world works, because a lot of people think they know how the world works, but they don't enjoy how the world works, and I was enjoying. And, and then I was in the midst of making love. This gets kind of personal. And there was, just this moment. We hadn't even hardly begun, and there was this moment where I thought, what's that sound? And because I could hear this roaring sound in the distance, and I wasn't all that distracted. And then I thought the whole earth was shaking. So, I thought, oh my God, we're having an earthquake. And those were the only two thoughts I had before this massive. The only thing you can compare it to is a sexual orgasm, but it is so much more than a sexual orgasm. It is beyond anything. If you took your best orgasm and multiplied it by 10 million times 10, you might not even get close to the power and the bliss of that experience. And, and it happened, the first couple times it happened in the midst of making love. And then it started to happen in the middle of driving to work, in the middle of, vacuuming the floor, in the middle of talking on the phone, or, whatever. It was very, very disturbing. And it continued, and it still does continue to unfold. And we're now, I'm thinking I'm like 38 years past that. And it does occasionally spring to life all by itself. Usually, it's something that I have done. I'm pretty good now at meditating, even though at the time I had no clue what was happening. I had zero background in metaphysical anything or spiritual anything. All I had was, my background as a farmer and my church and my family and my education. And that was it.
Now,
so it was very, very disturbing.
Yeah, sometime after that, not too long, you started being visited by little men in brown robes who gave you information about the future and the chaos that was going to occur in our society that is playing out on the world stage right now. How did they communicate this information to you?
All of the communication was telepathic, even though they appeared in my kitchen or my living room or my backyard. wherever I happen to be, and I would be almost always in a state of mind that was struggling with, what's happening to me, and, and what am I going to do? And so these little men, 6 or 7 of these little guys in brown robes that were very, very bright, they lit up the entire room. And I was very frightened at the first couple of times. But they wanted to show me, quote, some pictures. We have some pictures that may help. And, the first few times I was not very receptive. And then finally I thought, okay, I'll look, I'll watch their pictures and they'll go away. And they started, there were probably 12.5 visits altogether that just real, there's hardly any way to describe. At that time, this was 1980, 81, and a part of 82, I think. And so they wanted to show me what was going to happen in our world, and I could not imagine why they wanted to show me all that stuff. I was like, what am I supposed to do with this? And, so the first couple things I saw was like, whoa. And then it got more and more heavy duty and more, it was really kind of frightening in some ways. And, and they said some things that I just thought, no way, just not possible. Things about the wall is going to come down in Germany, the Berlin Wall. And, other things like the U.S. is going to break up. And I was just, no. That can't possibly be.
Penny, I'm going to hold you right there, and we're going to come back to it. You're listening to What is Going On. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and I'm speaking with consciousness researcher, author, and multidimensional traveler, Penny Kelly. After the break, Encounters with Elves, a collaboration with Dr. William Levengood, which revealed astounding secrets about energy and the nature of consciousness. Stay tuned.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Change and growth are part of natural life and also part of your spiritual life. Everyone needs support and guidance, especially during life passages. Upgrade yourself with the OMTimes Experts program. With OMTimes Experts, you have access to the best intuitive coaches, spiritual teachers, counselors, astrologists, and oracles. Our team was carefully selected so you can trust. Find out more at experts.omtimes.com.
My name is Meera Batra, and this is How I Live United. Many families have come to America for a better life. I advocate for these families with United Way. United Way empowers them to see opportunities available. We help them get involved with their kids, schools, and network within the community. My name is Meera Batra. I help families see opportunity and succeed. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer. Live United. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Welcome back. Penny Kelly, prior to the break, you were sharing some of the information the brown robes gave you, along with all the predictions that they gave that either have unfolded or are unfolding now. They also gave you lots of information about the nature of our relationship with the plant world. We can't go into all that now because there's so much to share with our listeners. But can you just tell us what they told you about the function of the human brain?
Oh my gosh, which thing? One of the things that I came away with was an understanding that the human brain was one of the organs in the body that was responsible for both receiving and sending information, and that we would eventually come around to just communicating that way. The brain is this amazing frequency generator, and the more that you can expand your range of frequencies that you operate over, the more you can see and hear and be part of in the world, or in the world of worlds. And what I discovered about them was that there are groups of beings who go around, I'll call it the world, and look for people who have awakened their consciousness. And they recognize those people because they have more light. They generate light. Our path is about enlightenment. And one of the things they said was that we would eventually be able, just using our brain, to regenerate bodies, plants, animals, houses that were falling down or falling apart if we so chose. All sorts of things could be, they were like manifested in a moment, but that we weren't there yet, but that was what was possible for us. And at the time, I was just kind of speechless. I didn't say much. I just listened because I thought that was the most outrageous thing I have ever seen, had ever heard. And so, it was really quite a change in the kind of thinking that I did. They wanted us to know that we have grown past our institutions and our structures and our system, and that democracy was a lower level stage in human development, but that we had to come to something called personal responsibility, and that we were facing massive changes because we had grown past our structures and systems, and that they would no longer work for us. They were very, very, I saw some amazing, fabulous scenes of the future, not the very distant future either. Most of what I saw was happening between 2020 or between 2000 and 2025. And so we're in the middle of that right now. And they said the most difficult years would be 2017, 18, and 19. And that's right where we are. And it's looking difficult. We have some decisions that we have to make. If we do not make the right decisions, we will, they said, most likely degenerate into civil war. And, and they said their goal was to help make sure that we didn't degenerate into primitive conditions. They wanted us to continue the evolution of the human being, and that we had struggled and worked long and hard to get as far as we had gotten, and we were at a crucial fork in the road. And I think that's exactly where...
Sorry, one of the things that interested me was that they said that the US government began acting as a corporation some years ago, and people don't realise that it is not a political system anymore. Like most nations, it's an economic structure and cannot operate without money. The things that they said about this are so appropriate for this time. And,
I know.
It's just astonishing. I mean, you must have thought, in the years in between that, must have wondered whether they were telling you the truth. But now, of course, you really have the evidence.
Yeah, for a while, I just kind of poo-pooed them and what I had seen, but I started looking for little details, and I could see the very earliest threads of what, because of my own clairvoyance, I could see these early threads, and I could see where that was going to go. And pretty soon I was seeing a lot that indicated that maybe they were right. And right up until the election of Donald Trump, I was hoping that they were wrong, and that maybe we could skip the difficult years. And it now, it looks like we made the right choice. We just needed to vote to change the energy. Everybody thought they were voting for Donald Trump. What they were really voting to do was to change the energy. And that, that change of energy is no small matter, because if we don't get creative now and start working together, then, we made that choice to back out of some very, very dark energy and to move into something that had some more options. And it really isn't about Trump. but, we're not getting that. People, some people are really upset, etc. So,
well, I regard him as the Molotov cocktail thrown into the system to bring it crashing down.
Oh, very nice. Yes, that's exactly what's happened. Yeah.
Uncomfortable, but necessary. So they also told you that one day you would come to understand in great detail the network of intelligent life that connects us all and holds and heals us all. And indeed, you later had an encounter with elves who live on your farm, who subsequently tutored you in organic gardening.
Yes. And it's true. I have come to understand a great deal about the intelligent network of life that really we are embedded in. And the elves were just the second part of the what I'll call the introduction to part of that intelligent life. And I did not believe in elves. I had never considered elves. I had never read anything about them. It was something that for me, I was so embarrassed about. I made a deal with these elves that we were raising grapes for Welsh grape juice. And we were getting, roughly 30 tons, maybe 34 tons, maybe 25 tons of grapes a year. And so they wanted me to start communicating with the soil and the plants. And I thought that was the craziest thing I ever heard. And I said, you know what? We got to talking. I said, if you give me 100 tons of grapes, I'll tell the world that you exist. And I don't want to tell the whole story, but, I ended up having to eat a lot of crow in order to, keep my end of the bargain. They were masterful teachers. Yeah, yes. And I learned a lot from them, and I began to communicate with all things, plants and animals and birds and water and wind and everything. And it turns out everything is alive and everything can be communicated with.
Wow. In your book, Consciousness and Energy, Volume 2, you share some of your many experiences traveling in different dimensions, meeting all kinds of beings. Is there any experience in particular that stands out for you in terms of what you experienced, what you learned, or the impact it had on your life and consciousness?
Sandy, the only thing I could really say in answer to that is that I have a huge family of beings that I deal with and communicate with on a regular basis, and I really appreciate that. It becomes a much richer life when you're not just limited to your crabby husband or your crabby kid or your crabby boss or whatever. I think, there have been so many. I don't know that I would be able to say which ones have had the most impact. But there is a group that I have dealt with that has kind of coached me in terms of human development. And I call them the super beings because I don't have any fancy names for all of these different beings that I work with. And some of them are actually would qualify as ET kind of beings. But the super beings are pretty powerful. And I met them on a day when I was just feeling really sassy. And, I challenged them. They kind of held me off, but, I did a few things that just at the time, at the moment, just came to me. And so what I would have to say in terms of dealing with other beings, and this is something that the elves have complained about, why they don't bother, this is their terms, we don't bother talking with people because most people are doormats. And my response, to people when they say, well, how come they communicate with you? It's because I think I treat them like I would anybody else. Like, who are you? You know, what do you need? What do you want? They tell me something. Where'd you get that idea? You know, I'll ask. I'm not gullible, and I'm not into, you know, just laying down and letting some quote unquote spiritual energy roll over me. And I have great problems with people who act like that. And so what I've learned is that there's this hunger among the other beings that are here trying to work with us for people to be real and to be who they really are. There's just this huge hunger for that. And, you know, I try to encourage all my students to, you know, be who you are and talk the way you talk and be sassy, not rude. Just be right out there with it.
Well, you did say in the book that, you know, the elves told you that when we elevate our consciousness, when we move forward, they can move forward too, and they can't until we do.
That's true. And I have to say that I have come to realize once you understand the system of life, so, you know, life is a system, and it has to be maintained. Because if you wink out, it can take trillions and you know, universe after universe before it would come together again. And so life is a system, and a reality system is an incubator of various forms of life. And we have here in this reality system on Earth one of the most diverse kinds of reality systems that exist.
Penny,
Amazing.
Hold it there. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and I'm speaking with author, teacher, and consciousness researcher Penny Kelly about consciousness, energy, and human transformation. Still to come, UFOs, crop formations, aliens, and why we need to elevate our consciousness. We'll be back in a moment. Don't go away.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
Hi, I found a toy dinosaur over on the playground by Smith Street. It had this phone number on it, and, well, I just wanted to make sure the dinosaur made it back to its little owner.
When I found a little sippy cup, I just had to give you a call. It's for a kid, you know?
I know my son gets super attached to the smallest things, even a fire truck, and I'd be happy to drop it off.
We'd do anything for kids, yet 1 in 6 children in the U.S. struggle with hunger. Help end childhood hunger near you. Learn how at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Welcome back. Penny Kelly, let's talk about your collaboration with Dr. William Levengood, whose study of plants and soils from crop formations in 1999 revealed astounding secrets about energy and the nature of consciousness. Tell us about some of those secrets.
Oh, my gosh, that's a big subject.
It is a big subject.
I started working with him. He was looking for people with unusual energies. We ended up kind of collaborating. The first few years was just, the two of us. He was kind of like the scientist, and I was one of the subjects in the lab. And, it evolved from there. And I was very interested in science, always have been, how things work, why things work. And I had written several books, and he wanted me to write about his his research because he was having great difficulty getting published. And I didn't want to, but I finally did. And I said to him at the time, you know, that I didn't really think I could do a good job with the science. He said, well, come on, let me teach you. So we entered into a mentorship, and then it took off from there. So in that time, we oh my gosh, we worked with materials from over 300 crop circles. He was an amazing scientist. As it turned out, I came to understand the whole science behind crop circles, and you know, and that included animal mutilations. We got materials from animal mutilations, materials where ETs had been reportedly, you know, seen or landed, etc. It turns out the bottom line is that when you have any kind of contact, or let me say it this way, the soils that were involved in crop circles had different physical and energetic properties. And it turns out that everything that a thing, whether that be a human, a plant, an animal, a rock, we tested rocks, water, whatever it is, it is affected by every form of energy that it comes into contact with. And so every single energy, every single interaction between two forms leaves an energetic fingerprint. And that fingerprint we learned to distinguish. He was just a master at it, and turned out that they were almost all the same kind of fingerprint. It was a form of energy that that boosted the energetic function in the plant or the stone or the animal or the, whatever it was, in the water or in a human. And so, that we began to research that energetic fingerprint. It came out, after many years, that what we thought we had discovered a brand new form of energy, but it was really plasma. And, and there's certain tests you can do for plasma, because plasma is there's a current going through the center of the plasma, and it's got an electromagnetic field that's orthogonal to that current flow, or the direction of that current flow. And it really was clear after a while that everything in existence was made of plasmas, a collection of plasmas. And there are certain characteristics then that we discovered about plasma. We started experimenting with that, and it turned out that plasma responds directly to consciousness. And that was kind of like a turning point. And at that point, he got very sick, and he did die. He passed a couple of years ago, 2013. And so I did finish the book that he asked me to write before he died, and he and I, went through it, and, he said, I can rest now. He said, I'm sorry that I didn't speak out more about consciousness. And I said to him, never mind. You're a scientist. You did your piece by working with me and a few other people, who really had some pretty amazing capacities of consciousness. Some of those people were just like, wow. But, the bottom line is what he uncovered is a basis for energy work, energy medicine, for psychic abilities. It's because if you get somebody who's really good at fine-tuning their brain, their consciousness, to tune into the set of frequencies and energetics associated with a particular object, then they can pick up all sorts of information about that object. And I have been in states of consciousness where it's phenomenal, where I can't even, explain hardly what you can know. You become all-knowing, forwards, backwards, and sideways in time, and you know everything about everything and about the history and everything that has ever touched an object and everything that ever will touch it. And it's just, there are states of consciousness that we have to, I think, eventually come to grips with. We are evolving. We need to understand the nature of reality, and it's really, we're right at the doorstep of that process. We're just beginning now. The shift of consciousness is in progress right now. It's going to be messy. That'll be okay. We'll be all right. A spiritual awakening is incredibly difficult. It's not the, what do you call it? You sit on a cushion and you chant and you meditate, etc. This real spiritual evolution or awakening is an awakening to the true self, that spirit of yourself, whether you're mean-spirited or whether you're generous or whether you have a passion for fishing or a passion for, knitting socks or a passion for creating art or music or whatever, science, that passion has to be followed, has to be honored. And that, when you develop that, you are literally developing the true spirit of yourself. And that's what real spirituality is. Most of what's out there is a lot of gobbledygook, and people aren't getting anywhere because they don't understand what real spirituality is. It's personal development of yourself.
One of the
very,
things
very
that
important.
Really impressed me about your work with Levengood was that he was able to track and measure consciousness. I mean, the only thing we've had before this is Hawkins, the Hawkins scale, and to me that's always seemed rather subjective, but he was literally able to track, measure, and show the level of consciousness. So, I mean, that's something that the skeptics, need in order to begin to believe. I want to move on now to UFOs. I mean, you've had your fair share of experience, and you've talked about, you've met all kinds of ETs. And I laughed when you said that the biggest shock humans would have in a confrontation with aliens would not be the way they look or sound or their weapons. It would be their amazing command of consciousness and what they can do with that consciousness.
Yeah, what they can do with their consciousness is nothing short of stunning. They know what we aren't even conscious of, and they know it with a certain level of grace and a certain kind of capacity. They can plant seeds of consciousness. They can shift consciousness. They can ease it or disturb it. They can, there's some things that I think are really important with consciousness, and that is that the more energy that you can traverse or handle moving through you, if you can become a river of energy, it changes the amount of energy that your cells have available to them. If you're in a ground state of energy, that means you have enough energy to stay alive. If you're in an S state or a P state or a D state or an F state, then you have increasing levels of energy. Your entire chemistry changes. All of your basic minerals and atoms change shape and change function, and you have more and more consciousness. And I think that is very, very important. We have to be able to channel more energy through us and not be wasting energy. That's something that we waste a lot of energy. I see a lot of energy being wasted right now. And I think that when you have a plant that begins to wake up to your attempts to communicate, it also begins to channel more energy. There's a long-term goal that we have. As with the earth, we are the consciousness, the operational consciousness of the earth at this point. And when the elves said to me, we can't go any further without you guys, I was just not at all clear what he meant. And what I realized much later was that the whole system has to go eternal together. And every planet has a dream of raising a group of people that will then take the system eternal. And there are very specific ways that happens, and it's too much to go into here. But I think it's important for us as a group to realize that everybody's waiting for us, the plants, the trees, the animals, other beings. The goal is to become an eternally self-regenerating form or set of forms or system. And that was one of the first principles that Levengood came up with, was that when you disturb the energy of any system, be it a cell or, water or whatever, it will immediately acknowledge that disturbance, and then it returns to its own homeostasis. And that, until it gets enough boost in energy to be able to reconfigure, it keeps returning to its former state. And I think that's what we're doing right now. Everybody's looking to go back to what we used to have. We can't. We need to go forward. We have to do something. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I like the phrase that you wrote, that consciousness sets energy in motion. And if we want to make a better life for ourselves on a practical level, if we want to hold our own in the face of, chaos or advanced forms of civilization or whatever, the only thing we can do is develop our consciousness.
That's right. Yeah. I love the way you have picked out little things. That's very important.
You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, and I'm speaking with teacher, author, and consciousness researcher Penny Kelly. After the break, a little bit more talk about enlightenment, what it is, and why elevating our consciousness all begins in the body. We'll be back in a few moments.
Bringing a more conscious lifestyle to your world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Spiritual, metaphysical, green living, psychic, alternative healing, life coaching. Do any of these or similar terms apply to your business or cause? If so, you are in a niche market with a very specific audience. Conscious Gate PR is the world's leading conscious public relations agency. With a global reach of over 4 million and growing, we offer comprehensive media campaigns to our targeted market. Learn more at consciousgatespr.com. Conscious marketing for conscious minds.
Hi everyone, this is Shay Parker, the host of Best of the Best, which airs live right here on IOM Radio every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific. I'm super excited to bring you expert guest hosts, spiritual discussions, free psychic readings, and so much more. I can promise that you will not want to miss this one-of-a-kind, fun, yet touching, down-to-earth show. Join us every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific on OTR-FM. This is Shay Parker, and I can't wait to see you there.
If you own a gun, you have a full-time responsibility. When you aren't using it, be sure it can't get into the hands of curious children, troubled teenagers, a thief, or anyone else who might misuse it. Your family, friends, and neighbors are all counting on you. Remember, always, lock it up. For more information on firearms storage safety, visit ncpc.org. This message brought to you by the National Crime Prevention Council, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and the Ad Council.
Welcome back. Penny Kelly, you say that the density of the physical body is what holds each of us to the lower dimensional planes of existence. Tell us more about that.
Well, I think it's important to understand that the human body is an amazing structure. It's an energetic structure, and it's made of plasmas, and it is designed to unfold in a way that is very, very powerful. I think it's really, there's a lot of talk about, what do they call that, ascension. We're going to ascend, et cetera, or transcend, or whatever. And I think, no, we're not going anywhere. You can't get to evolved states unless you have a body to work with. The body is designed kind of like an acorn, has this pattern or this blueprint in it for a gigantic oak tree, and the body is designed in a similar way. It unfolds to certain capacities and certain levels of energy. It can hold certain a certain amount of energy transmuting and making a trip through the body every second. And so I think we need to understand that we are designed to turn into light. When we do that, the body becomes much less dense. It is not relegated to a land-based reality system. We move into a space-based reality system. When you develop your consciousness, you can then manipulate the plasma fields to create whatever you need. That is the true definition of abundance, being able to create whatever you need as you need it, not accumulating a lot of stuff that you then have to take care of and you don't have time really to take care of you. The body it unfolds in stages, and I think people have seen, probably a lot of people in the spiritual movement have seen that the Kabbalah, it's called a tree of life kind of thing, or even the flower of life that Drunvalo talks about, etc. When the human body mind system is fully developed, you have these 10 or 12 major chakras that are in full operation. Right now we only have 7, and they're always pictured as going straight up the body. But you begin to develop other energy centers that are very powerful and that help regenerate certain organs and certain areas of the body, and we enter into eternal living. We move past death. Death is just, allowing us to start over again because we didn't pay attention to, it's like being held back in school. Can't move to the 7th grade until you, pass all the tests in the 6th grade. And so it really is something that people, I think a lot of people think that the body is just excess baggage. And, most of my information and experience has taught me that you can't get anywhere without the body. It's the body that you want to transform. And that takes a considerable amount of work. You have to eat right. You have to breathe right. You have to preserve the body long enough to figure out, how do I enter into some of these advanced levels of consciousness and being? Because as your consciousness changes, so does your body. And that's very, very important. And I think, in the long run, most people think enlightenment is just getting in some kind of intellectual, some kind of educational change happens. That's not true. When you begin to enter into enlightenment, the body begins to turn into light. And I have some evidence that that's happening. I've been working on that for quite a long time. It isn't something that happens overnight, but I have some photos that are pretty astounding. And I think, eventually we end up to be these beings of light who can move anywhere, don't need airplanes, trains, boats, etc. You literally move past the kind of reality system we have here. And so at some point you have to detach and still love. You still have to love. You become a fountain of love, and you have to let that fountain flow. You can't be sticking a cork in it all the time and saying, well, that's not right, and that's not fair, and that's not, da-da-da. There's all sorts of excuses to put the cork in. But we have to become a fountain of love and let that fountain flow. And it carries us in the right direction, which is toward becoming an eternal being.
Well, we know, we've only got to look at the rapid growth of the mind-body-spirit movement to know that millions of people are reading the books, attending the seminars, etc. But we're not going to do it through the mind, as you said. So how do we raise the frequency matrix of our bodies? How do we elevate our consciousness? I mean, I'm sure the mind somewhere has something to do with it, but ultimately it's got to be an experiential, hasn't it?
It does. It does. And there's a couple of things that I could say in an attempt to answer that question. You could get, you could have a full Kundalini experience. That is, that involves some sexual experience as well. Kundalini generates its own sexual experience, and it happens in the brain. And people are so uncomfortable with that they, as soon as the whole sexual aspect comes up, they get all confused, and and a lot of people have lots of things, lots of biases and fears and shame and guilt around sex, and so they never get anywhere. I think another way is that we could get struck by lightning, but that's really dangerous. It destroys more than it creates. However, you do have an awakening as an after effect. We could have, I think meditation is probably the best way. You have to come to a moment when you are totally involved with yourself in that moment, totally. And all of your shields go down, to use a Star Wars term. All of your defenses go down. You're totally open to the moment. And when that happens, what you experience is this instant, blast of energy. You are a being who is designed to have a certain level of energy flowing through the system at all times. And it's very similar, I like to use the example of a submarine. If you're in a submarine and somebody pokes a hole in the submarine, the water doesn't say, "Oh, should we go in?" There's guys in there. Should we? There might be a problem if we fill that sub. The water doesn't hesitate for one split second. It just rushes in. Well, that is the same thing that happens when all of your guards go down, all of your assumptions about how it should be, all of your expectations, all of your hopes, and you just go with the moment. And when you do that, Kundalini moves through you. It is the raw power of it is stunning. It's frightening. It's very frightening. And sometimes people shut it off because it's so noisy and so frightening. And it involves a lot of shaking. And so those things are part and parcel of a true awakening. Once that happens, then you're different. You're different forever. You cannot go back. And it isn't a matter of just having a little bit of power or insight added to your logic and your reason. Nothing about that at all. It is something that changes you forever, and it raises the energy flow through the body-mind system, affecting both the body and the mind forever. And I detail that experience in my first book, and it is quite a frightening, quite a disturbing thing if you don't know what's happening.
Penny, we are almost out of time. I have a couple of things I want to say to you. One is that the chaos that was predicted by the brown robes, the chaos that we are seeing the beginnings of now, if people are raising their consciousness, if they have a higher level of consciousness, are they going to experience that chaos differently?
They will. You mean the people, if they've raised their consciousness, yes, they're going to, what they're going to do is see the big picture much more easily. What you get with people who are not very awake is that they zero in on some little tiny thing, and they get all caught up and all tangled in that, and they lose the gist of what's really happening. So yes, you will see the big picture differently and much deeper and much more long term.
So now I want to ask you, since we've only just scratched the surface of your research and information, there's so much more I want to share about Kundalini awakening, its role in the evolution of humanity, the stages of spiritual development, and also what you learned from your intensive year-long study of the history of humanity that encompasses 40,000 years, lost civilizations, the goddess, religion, sex, power, human transformation, energy and consciousness. I want to make you a proposition, something that I've never done before. I would like to propose that you and I continue this conversation sometime in the next week or two and record it and share that recording on our Facebook pages. Are you up for that?
I sure am. I think it's really important for people to understand where we are, how we got where we are, what we are becoming. So, yes.
Great. Then I invite listeners to sign up.
I'd be honored.
Thank you. I invite listeners to sign up for notifications on mine or Penny's Facebook page, and you'll be the first to know how to access that recording. Penny Kelly, thank you for joining us today.
You're so welcome.
And more information on everything is available at pennykelly.com. I'm Sandy Sedgbeer. I'll be back next week. I hope you'll join me. Till then, it's goodbye from me.